and I will post in the chat the link to the handouts. This is a reminding that the meeting is being recorded, and if you don't wish to be on camera, please turn your camera off, but we would love to see your faces and have you interact with us. So if you're able, please leave your camera on. Please mute. And if you have questions, please place them into the chat and we will be watching the chat. If you are a legislator, please chat me and let us know that you are in the room and we will put you at the top of the list. So thank everyone for joining us, and we'll get started with Mary Crutchfield. Or Julia.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I would like to introduce Julia Tanner, our wonderful advocacy chair, who is coming up next.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you for leading the Women's Legislative Roundtables each week. It's pretty exciting to have this be our week for our big advocacy push. All of the local leagues and members at large, welcome. Thank you, Deb, our president, for introducing me, as well as Mary, who's our first VP, our second VP, and to Joan, our first VP, who I see putting helpful links in the chat for all of you. So I am operating off of notes today. The legislature moves fast, and I've got the latest updates for you on all of our bills. We're going to be meeting with members of the General Assembly or their aides this week and asking them to pass laws that affect all of us. They affect aspects of our democracy, the right to vote, how we hold elections, and the power of government working for voters. We only advocate when a position from our study process is the basis of the advocacy. And this is a recap for those of you who have not attended our recent trainings. For every session, we choose key priorities to focus on that are approved by the board. You can see them on our website at lwv-va.org/action. And also on that page, you will find one-page fact sheets that you can download. You can refer to them when you're in meetings, and they are also in a format that lets you easily send them to your legislators before or after your meetings to remind them of positions on the bills that we're going to talk about. After these legislative updates, we'll hear from one of our issue group leaders and then from legislators who will be here to discuss a variety of bills that they are working on for this session. If you don't have meetings set up with your lawmakers or their aides for today or this week, and you are in or near a local league, you can reach out to its leaders. They may be able to help you get together for meetings. It is great if you can go with other members to combine forces. And that also lets you plan a little bit in advance who's going to take notes or ask questions or send a thank you note afterwards, which can simply be an email. That is fine. While I am talking, as always, feel free to look up your state legislator's contact information by entering your address at whosmy.virginiageneralassembly.gov. It works best on a computer for some reason. I really want all of you all to know your legislators. If you don't know who they are, it's one of the most important things you can do. Look it up. Enter your address at whosmy.virginiageneralassembly.gov. You can get to know them. They are your neighbors, and they are in our house, the General Assembly, in order to represent you. So now I'm going to switch. I have some slides, so I'm going to do my best here to share my screen. Let's see. Let's hope that this works. I have a new computer, always exciting. And it is not wanting to share my screen. Hold on just a moment, please.
Julia, if you're having trouble, you could send the slides to me if it's not working, and I'll put them up.
You have to post in order to send them, in order to share.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Okay, let me try this one more time, though. It might work now. We'll see.
Aha. Got it. Had to unlock something because it's a new computer, and I do apologize. So there we go. Can you all see my screen? Great.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm so glad. So she is me. This is all of us working to make our democracy better, helping voters. This is our house. Whose house is it? It is our house. That's a General Assembly. And this year, the House of Delegates portion of it is meeting virtually, while the Senate is still in general meeting in person, but casting their meetings over Zoom video feature. If you go to lis.virginia.gov, that is the legislative information system. If you are interested, at the bottom of that page or near the bottom, you can see links to video. And almost any time during the day, you can click and watch your legislators in action. It's pretty interesting. A brief recap about them for anyone who didn't have one of our recent trainings. We have 40 state senators and 100 state delegates. They usually meet here in the state capitol in Richmond. Each of these legislators is elected by citizens in an individual geographic area of Virginia. So every one of you has a state senator and a state delegate. Your state senators are not Senator Tim Kaine and Senator Mark Warner. Those two represent us all in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. Senate. But today, and in general, the League talks about our state legislators. They have a great deal to do with all of the laws that affect us directly and personally every day. I'm going to talk through our legislative priorities and bill updates now, and then after that, we'll talk about best practices during a meeting with lawmakers so you will feel comfortable and as ready to go see them as anyone else you might meet with. One thing that I want you to think about during this discussion is telling your story. As human beings, research shows that we are impacted when someone tells us their personal experience. The lawmakers know this, and they listen for their constituents' stories, because sometimes those can help them remember a point or make them feel closer to the person who is their voter after all, or at least a constituent of theirs. They care about you even if you are not one of their voters. And they can also make a good anecdote for their floor speeches. A moment of connection that we share can transport them into another person's shoes to help them understand what we're saying. Do you have a story about how one of our priority bills directly affected you, or your town, which the lawmaker serves, or someone you know? Could you tell that story in under a minute? That is something to keep in mind. If you have one, share it during your meeting with them. But the trick is keeping it to a minute or two at the most and tying it back to your request for your lawmaker. And I'm going to give you an example before we launch into the bills. Like you, my brother is a veteran. He's a former JAG attorney who now helps our neighbors, but he got caught near a blast in Iraq years ago. So he has trouble walking and he can't stand very long, but he really likes to hand deliver his own ballot and see it go to the polls. Well, the ballot boxes last November were a godsend. They enabled him to quickly deliver his ballot to the polls. He didn't have to wait at all. I really hope that you will support SB 1245 and HB 1888. Please vote for them because they will help people vote without entering a polling place. So there you go. You told your story, you wound up with the ask, and it was in under a minute. Practice ahead of time and time yourself. And this leads into our first priority. So the League supports the right of every eligible voter to vote easily, safely, and securely. Two bills that are moving very well this session will support absentee voters. They will help people who want to make sure that their votes count, but without entering a polling place or coming near to a witness sometimes. These bills make permanent the temporary legislation to allow convenient absentee ballot drop-off locations, and they provide an opportunity for absentee voters to correct procedural errors on their ballots. Sometimes very minor errors can cause a little flub, and they could be easily corrected if you were there in person. Well, why not allow absentee voters to correct them as well? Let's also talk about ballot drop-off. Some voters want that assurance of hand delivery, but waiting in line can be problematic. Maybe they need to return quickly to a job or a sick family member or a baby. 40 states already allow drop-off of absentee ballots at designated locations. And the COVID working group of the US CISA calls drop boxes secure and convenient. This assurance of access to the ballot box strengthens the integrity of our democracy. And here's the status of these bills. SB 1245, which was filed by Craig Deeds. He is a senator who's the chair of the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee, a very powerful committee that affects almost all of our bills. That bill was passed by that committee yesterday. At some point soon, it will go to the full Senate for a vote. After 3 hearings on 3 consecutive legislative days and a vote on that last day, the bill can go over to the House and follow the same procedure in the House. It will go to committee and then hopefully go to the floor for a vote. So far, so good. This bill is on its way. There's a similar bill from the House, HB 1888, which was filed by Delegate Van Valkenburg. It has some extra bells and whistles that make it a very good bill. It has already passed over from the House to the Senate, and it is currently in the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee also. It, however, was not passed out of committee yesterday. So either it will stay there, so the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee chair's bill will be the one that passes, or perhaps he will let the House bill pass eventually, and then they will be reconciled in a conference committee closer to the end of session. I think in our view, that would be the ideal result, but either way, both of these bills make advances and are good. So we strongly support these bills, and we hope that you will ask your lawmakers to support them. Another bill that is doing quite well is SB 1097 from Senator Favola. This is the witness signature bill. As a University of Virginia academic testified in a recent case brought by the League of Women Voters of Virginia, the requirement that a witness sign one's absentee ballot envelope makes it more difficult and burdensome to vote by mail, especially for citizens who live alone, which includes many League members. It includes, in general, the elderly, minorities, those with disabilities, those who live in rural communities, and low-income voters. Not all Virginians can easily go find a witness. Almost 33% of Virginians over age 65 live alone. 23.6% of Virginians have a disability, 12.1% have serious mobility issues, and 4.1% are blind or have serious vision impairment. And African-American Virginians are more likely to live alone or have a disability or lack transportation. So this actually affects a lot of our neighbors, and it may affect your family or yourself. On the flip side, the witness requirement itself is not especially effective in preventing voter fraud, which is the reason that opponents will sometimes mention. Witness signatures are not verified. They can even be illegible. So they're not actually helping. And absentee ballot fraud is vanishingly rare. That is a statistical term, which one of our colleagues here in the League loves to talk about. It is still more likely for an American to be struck by lightning than to commit mail voting fraud. It just doesn't happen. In a study of 13 years, the Heritage Foundation found only 3 cases in Virginia. Okay. So states with no witness signature requirement and no voter signature matching include Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, New Mexico, Vermont, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. Instead, there are many security measures applied to our absentee ballots. There's a special paper, there are tracking codes. You have to send in personal information to actually receive the ballot at your address. It comes to you at your address, and voters generally sign an enforceable oath of signing it under penalty of perjury. This bill is doing well. It passed the Senate, already went all the way through committee and the Senate on Monday. It's really good news when bills cross over well before what's called the crossover date, which is when bills go from one chamber, the House or the Senate, to the other to be worked on. The crossover date this session is each chamber has to finish working on its own bills on February 5th, and then on February 6th, they can start working on, in general, only bills from the other chamber. So Senator Favola's witness signature bill crossed over really nice and early. That's a really good sign. And I'm proud to say she is my senator. Woo! The next top priority that I'm going to talk about is a State Voting Rights Act. There are 3 bills in the legislature that would accomplish, they would provide for prior review of practices that were restricted under the Federal Voting Rights Act. Under the Federal Voting Rights Act, states that had a history of discrimination against particular segments of voters, particularly minority group members, and this particularly applied to African Americans. There was discrimination in primarily southern states, but also surprising states like California. These states were subject to the Voting Rights Act, and they had to obtain federal approval before changing their voting laws. Passage of the VRA was followed by notable increases in Black voter registration and participation. It was a very good thing. However, in recent years, well, actually, I believe it was, check me on this, that was it 2013, the Supreme Court struck down a key formula in the process in a case called Shelby County versus Holder. In former preclearance states, when that decision came out, well, it put the preclearance process on hold, and states started passing new restrictions on voting. And many voters have lost their right to vote through illegal voter roll purges and other changes. So SB 1395, HB 1890, and HB 1883, any of these would help avoid changes that tend to disenfranchise voters, such as restrictions on translators or consolidating polling places and moving them far away from public transportation. 2 of these bills are doing very well. One of them was filed by the vice chair of the powerful House Privileges and Elections Committee. Her name is Marcia Price, and she goes by Sia. And a subcommittee has recommended that the full committee send her bill forward. The other is a companion Senate bill, essentially the same text from Senator McClellan, which just cleared Senate Privileges and Elections Committee. We call the Privileges and Elections Committees P&E, and it has been sent to Finance and Appropriations before it goes to the Senate floor. The third bill, oh gosh, Joan is sending me a note. My slideshow isn't progressing. Oops, okay. let me catch up. We are on preclearance. The third bill is HB 1883. It has not moved, perhaps because Delegate Price would prefer to have her own bill prevail. It's nice to have legislators want so much to pass a good bill, if that's the case, but perhaps they will roll one bill into the other and send them forward together. We really don't know. There could be lots of reasons why this is happening, but in any event, things are looking good for preclearance in general. So please push it. We would still like it to happen. And actually, it looks like the lawmakers are verging towards not calling it preclearance, but calling it by the name that they are giving the act, which is they're going to call it a Virginia Voting Rights Act. The next priority is what we call the 100% right to vote constitutional amendment. It will protect the right to vote so it is not taken away upon incarceration for a felony. This prohibition in our state constitution on allowing felons to vote has resulted in fully 1/5 of the Black people in Virginia being unable to vote. This constitutional language in Virginia was twice expanded during the Jim Crow era. It is a vestige of racism. As one of our members says, Jim Crow must go. The resolution that we are supporting, SJ 272 from Senator Mamie Locke, co-patroned by Senator McClellan, is the only one that would let people vote from jail. The League does believe that all eligible Americans do deserve the right to vote. Our president, Deb Wake, wrote a letter to the governor because he and legislative leaders are pushing for different bills to pass that would not give voting rights to people who are incarcerated for a felony. They do restore voting rights after people do their time. This is a step in the right direction, but without SJ 272, a very significant number of our population, our neighbors, will remain disenfranchised for years. So we and a large coalition of organizations for good governance are pushing for the full resolution, SJ 272. The alternate House bills were amended the other day to make sure that voting rights will be restored automatically right after incarceration ends, not after release from subsequent supervision. So that is a good step, but we still believe in 100% right to vote. The next priority that we are advocating for is campaign finance reform. Virginia is known as the wild, wild west when it comes to campaign finance. We score abysmally and tend to fail surveys as to how our campaign finance situation is. So Delegate Bulova has put in a resolution, HJ 526, which would provide for a comprehensive study of campaign finance reforms. This might include adopting public financing like 14 other states, or limiting contributions from individuals, corporations, parties, and PACs, so that there's an even playing field and equitable way for people to participate in this in our legislative landscape. A full 45 out of 50 states have these contributions limits, and that's just one aspect of reforms that could be adopted. We are also supporting HB 1952 from Delegate Simon. He is the powerful chair of the House P&E Committee. HB 1952 clarifies that candidates cannot use campaign funds for personal use. I think Delegate Simon has the power if he wants to get his bill through the House. But our question for both bills is whether they will survive the Senate. Every senator will be important in getting these bills through, especially leaders like Senator Saslaw and Teeds and possibly Senator Howell. I think the most persuasive reason that we have seen resonating with legislators is that voters right now do not have a lot of trust in lawmakers or our democracy. Popularity ratings are in the tank. These bills will help pave a path to greater trust by voters in the integrity of the General Assembly and our representative democracy. A second very good fact to know is that 45 other states do limit contributions, as I mentioned. One senator told us, money like water will find a way. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't build dams. Bills like these will help restore voters' trust. Joan, if you could be so kind as to let me know when I get near time, I'd be very grateful. Or Mary. The next bill that I'd like to talk about is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is SB 1101 and HB 1933. I'm sorry to say that the national organization pursuing the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact has decided that it's not going to happen in Virginia this year. They have some good reasons, so I'm going to tell you those reasons and what we can do. Without amending the United States Constitution, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is the only way to ensure that the United States president will be elected by the popular vote of all voters. This is a compact among all states, which is why it is in front of our state legislature. Its goal is to ensure that every vote matters in presidential elections. So all voters have a fairly equal voice in the election. Just like redistricting, not casting an electoral vote to reflect the popular vote can devalue the votes of a multitude of people. So 16 states have already joined this compact. And here's how it worked. States that join the compact agree that once enough states have joined, their electors will cast their votes for the presidential candidate who receives the most popular votes across the nation, all 50 states and the District of Columbia. The compact is a state-based approach, and it does preserve the Electoral College, and it preserves state control of elections and the power of the states to control how the president is elected without having to change the US Constitution. But unfortunately, it appears there is still too much resistance in our Virginia State Senate for it to pass if this bill gets to the floor of the Senate. The holdout legislators who would be needed to tip the balance of the bill, which was filed this year by Senators Ebbin and Lucas, the holdouts are Monty Mason, John Edwards, and Chap Peterson. If you are in one of their districts, please talk with them about the importance of the national popular vote. Or if you've already done that and you want something new to do, please write a letter to the editor of your local paper. Swaying public opinion over time is really what's going to matter. They want to hear from a lot of their constituents. There are helpful tips for writing letters to the editor on our webpage and at virginia-organizing.org/speak-out. Letters to the editor are a pastime at which league members really shine. We are really good at this. You can anchor a letter to the editor with a brief, compelling story about why the bill matters or something about your region or about your legislator that is appealing. And talk to your neighbors about it, tell your civic association, tell your realtor, tell your grocer, ask friends or relatives in your area to call your state senator, start a petition. All of these are ways in which it grows. Okay. So now I'm
Excuse me,
going,
Julia, you have a question? Someone,
Yes.
Chris wants to know, you said Mason, Peterson, and who else?
John Edwards.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to give a shout out to the Montgomery County League, which is served by Jan Edwards. They've been working so hard on this. Our final priority for this session, our final key priority, and we have many priorities, which we do pursue when we have the opportunity, but we have these focus bills. So our final priority is more broadband coverage. Broadband, especially right now, is a matter of geographic equity in access for government, education, economic opportunities, telemedicine, and voter information and services. We have some members who have sent in stories that you will see at the bottom of the broadband fact sheet that is linked on our website. Do you have a story? Tell it to your lawmaker. What are the solutions to the lack of broadband throughout our Commonwealth? There are a few. We have been requesting additional funding support for broadband, and a lot of legislators are pretty excited by this idea. They would love more broadband in their districts, so they're offering amendments to the budget bills. The budget bills are huge. They have a lot of issues in them in addition to broadband, so you would want to ask your legislators to support broadband amendments to the budget bills, which are HB 1800 and SB 1100. We are also supporting some broadband pilot projects, such as SB 1225, SB 1334, and HB 1923. And what these would do is they would allow utilities to make available their excess broadband space for municipalities, your towns and cities to use. They'll probably charge your municipality, so you might want to ask the legislators to make sure that those rates will be reasonable so that the municipalities are able to offer the broadband to citizens at a reasonable charge, because affordability is also a big problem for broadband. And finally, we are supporting removal of barriers to broadband provided by municipalities. There are so many towns, cities, and counties that would like to offer broadband, but they're caught up in a tangle of laws and regulations that are specifically designed by corporate lobbyists to make sure that they don't get competition for customers from our localities. Now is a really urgent time to remove these. For example, there's a requirement that they can't build their own broadband unless they involve certain existing telecommunications companies. That would mean, of course, they have to pay the middleman instead of building the broadband themselves. There's another requirement that they have to recoup their investments super rapidly, which would mean that they would have to charge high prices in order to pay back for that infrastructure. There's one stating that they can only serve areas shown as unserved on coverage maps, which are highly inaccurate, as stated in a 2019 report from the governor's office. So let's clear out some of these rules. You can just generally explain to your legislator that you would like them to make it easier for municipalities to offer broadband. All right. Now I'm going to segue into best practices during meetings, and I can't see my clock, so I will keep going until someone tells me it's time. So we're going to have these legislative meetings, and if you've never been to one, they're very enjoyable. It helps to allocate responsibilities before you go into the room. Who is going to present each issue? Will one person take notes or more? Who will write the thank you notes? It's good to send thank yous on the same day if possible. Sometimes you will find your meeting is with a legislative aide, or it's in an odd place. You don't have to worry about the place this time, but it's good to know for the future. Don't worry about it, that's fine. And it can even be better sometimes if you're meeting with the aides. They are trusted advisors of the legislators, and sometimes they're the people who are helping the Division of Legislative Services write the bills. Pay attention to time. You may only get 10 or 15 minutes. Or you may find that the legislator or one of your colleagues is so chatty that you never get to your ask or to find out your lawmaker's position on the bills. So it helps to ask up front how long you have for the meeting and keep an eye on the clock. Stay cordial, but you may find that you need to move things along gently. Start with a little bit of pleasantries. Thank you them for something that they did for the district. For example, a great law that they helped pass. And you'll want to do introductions, your name and your town. And I suggest you really don't do more than that unless you and the legislator have a really close connection you want to tell them about. For example, you both served together in the armed forces, or you taught at the same college, for example. Because otherwise, once you fall down the rabbit hole of talking about your background, we all love to talk about ourselves mainly. You may never recover and never get to your ask. So just names and towns is usually good. And next is the actual discussion. There are 3 parts to this: your ask, your reasons, and you find out your legislators' positions. The first thing, if you come away from this with nothing else, remember, lead with your ask. What do you want the legislator to do? You usually want them to pass or defeat a bill. So your ask is, for example, please pass SJ 1245. So you start with your ask so you won't forget to make it. Otherwise, they will go away only knowing some things that you think, but they won't really know what you want them to do about it. After your ask, you're going to give your reasons. Try to keep your pitch to a reasonable length. You have a lot of bills to get through, so remember that. And if you're going with a group, it's good to have just one member state maybe 1 or 2 reasons for each bill. It can be a personal story. Another good example, my mom and I voted in a ballot box this year because she's immunocompromised. It felt great to know that she could really have the security of seeing her vote go in. Then the third part is you ask your lawmaker, what is their position? This is super important. Are they going to vote for the bill? It's so helpful if we know which legislators support which bills. So make sure you send us that intel afterwards on the advocacy challenge. We can put that link in the chat. You can report about your meetings on the last blank in the form. Here is one additional side note about something that can happen in these meetings. Deb is an expert on nonpartisanship. So Deb, if you have something to add, please jump in. But you all know the league is nonpartisan. And during these league day or league week meetings, sometimes people slip. We have members who are across the political spectrum. Most of us try, therefore, to stay away from partisan comments in a meeting and just talk about the issues and supporting voters. But you might, what if you slip and blurt out something partisan? Follow it up by saying something like, speaking for myself, an individual, and the league is nonpartisan. If your lawmaker knows that you are meeting as a league group, you want to just kind of patch over that little oops, and they will understand you're not speaking for the organization. Only Deb can speak for the organization. When you are done, you repeat your ask if you have time. You thank the legislator or their aide, and you are not done. You're going to leave the meeting, but after that, remember, you have homework. You send your thank you note. If you promise the legislator any follow-up materials, send them promptly. You can attach them to the thank you note, hopefully, and fill out the advocacy challenge. We will see, and we will be super grateful. You can also join one of our issue teams. And we've got the issue group sign-up link here. That's a really fun way to stay engaged and educate and work on these issues. And League Day is not the only time we contact our legislators. It is great to attend their town halls and schedule meetings or chats with them that are not in session, have virtual coffee if they're available, get to know them. And they say that time in the off session really is some of the most impactful because they feel like they have a relationship with you, they know you. Here's some more helpful links for those of you who do use the internet much. And during the session, you can always email or call their offices. These days, one often has to leave a message, but that is fine. Their aides count the messages. If they get a lot on a topic, they notice. And they report these to the lawmakers. So all of this really does move bills. We've seen it happen time and time and time again. We've had legislators who want us to help support a bill, tell us to get people calling and writing in. So this is all just, it's basic advocacy. But now you know about our bills, you know the updates, their status. You can kind of visualize yourself in one of these meetings. I hope you will reach out to your local league leader if you haven't done so already to see if you've got some meetings that are being set up. And I am available for some questions. Do we have any questions that have been put in the chat? Let me see if I can stop.
None that have not already been answered. Lisa, Deb has answered her, but Lisa asked about opposition. What do you say if you know your legislator is opposed to one or more of the bills that you're pushing?
You know, you're really going to conduct it just like a regular meeting, although you can acknowledge that. But it's not something to emphasize really. You'll make your ask, state your reasons, personal stories are really good in that circumstance because they really help the legislator feel why this should happen. It's the feelings. You don't want to get over the top and dramatic, of course, keep it professional, but the personal stories can really help them link to the rationales. So that I would advocate for giving clear facts with absolutely impeccable sources and really good stories. That's all you could do. And you can say, if you want to acknowledge that they're opposed, you can say that. I have heard you say X. I hope that you'll come away from this meeting, thinking a little bit more why. Here are the reasons that we think.
Marianne Moxon says, want to make the point that our male members may also vote like a girl. I like that.
I do too.
There's a question also about your story. Be careful when you're telling a story that you don't accidentally identify a person or a place in your story, that you may be talking about something personal that person may not want to share.
That's true.
A very good point.
Yep, absolutely. If your registrar did something embarrassing, you might not want to put them on that stage in a meeting. Yeah, for example. Yes. Okay.
That's all the questions.
Yeah, there are not a lot of questions.
Oh, wait a minute. How does the League of Virginia choose their priorities?
So the way that the League of Virginia chooses priorities is first, take it back to study. So the League has a generally 2-year study process in which League members study an issue very carefully, do a great deal of research, and they write up their findings. And then the study results get presented for the entire League to, or delegates of the League to vote upon after the 2 years are up. And if the League adopts the results of that study, then we can advocate based on it. Now, studies are also formulated and adopted at the national level and also at the local league levels. And as a state league, we are permitted to advocate based on national positions or local league positions even. So the Virginia League, for example, does not often study issues that the National League already has formed positions on because we don't need to repeat what they've already done, but we can work from their positions as well.
Julia, Delegate Betsy Carr is here. Delegate Carr, would you like to address the audience?
Thank you very much. Really appreciate being here. Good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for what you continue to do, your strong advocacy. We just really depend on it. And just to thank each and every one of you for your energy and advocacy. Thank you. It's so helpful. I don't know, you all are talking about bills. As you know, we have limited bills on our agendas for each of our delegates this year. I'm happy about some of the ones that I was able to put in having to do with lowering the speed limits in our residential and business districts because we've had such a increase in traffic fatalities from speeding vehicles hitting pedestrians and so forth. Put in some, I always like to do things from JLARC, which is our Joint Legislative and Review Commission. You know, they're our watchdog for how our taxpayer money is spent and how our agencies are run and governed. So I have something that incorporates the recommendations of a JLARC recommendation from December, which is including recommendations on a report about our K-12 special education, um, uh, uh, special education division. And, you know, there's so many of our students are kind of being left behind because of not adequate IEPs and studies. And we also have a real shortage of special education teachers. So this is directed toward that because, as you know, education of our young people is so important as we move forward. Also have something for the Landlord Tenant Act and something for our student folks with the disabilities that we're working with in the Attorney General's office. Just want to be able to be available. I always appreciate talking to any of you all, to seeing you. So I hope you will stay in touch with me. We're setting up a lot of Zoom meetings during the session. We always have it afterwards too. But if anyone needs to call me, my number is 804-986-6852. And then my email is delegate.carr@betsycarr.org. But again, thank you so much for having me this morning. And I really appreciate all the work that you do and look forward to continue learning from you and working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate Carr. Appreciate your time and your efforts in the General Assembly this session.
Absolutely, and thank you for supporting the study that Delegate Bulova has filed for campaign finance reform.
Yes.
We saw your committee support and we're really grateful.
Yes, we have a number of really important budget amendments I neglected to mention, but having the privilege of being on the appropriations committee, we have a lot of important things to look at, and hopefully we'll be able to work with those and get a lot of things done this particular session. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that is so wonderful that Delegate Carr stopped in, and we may have additional drop-ins. I'm going to answer some more of your questions for a while, and then we're going to welcome one of our members who's in our Criminal Justice Issue Committee to talk about those matters.
Yeah, Julia, you have a question about the death penalty
Okay.
abolition bill?
Great. So, you know, we have a lot of priorities as a result of all the studies that have happened over the years. And abolition of the death penalty is something that we care very much about. We did provide testimony on the bills at one point. We may do so again. It's exciting to see people's interest in that. And I also see in the chat that environmental bills have been mentioned. And we also care very much about clean air and clean water. You know, these are among our priorities that we are also tracking and watching, and we have issue groups that are tracking and watching them. And testimony can be offered sometimes when there's a key bill that comes up. But also as individuals, we are welcome at any time to send in our comments. You can send them to your legislators, or on the House side, you can also send comments to the clerks of a committee that's about to hear a bill. Yeah, I'm just looking in the comments.
Julia, may I interject here?
Please.
I would like to note that just a reminder that you have the power as a constituent to address your lawmakers, and you're not addressing your lawmaker as a league member. You can use our talking points, but you are there because you have the power of your vote and your ability to affect your lawmaker as a constituent. However, we do have opportunities to speak as the league, and our members are doing that this session. So if you're interested in speaking as a league member, please do reach out and contact me about that. Thanks.
That's
There is a
wonderful.
question about the National Popular Vote Compact and what 16 states are already in there. Is that in the sheet? If not, I will find it and put it in chat.
I don't believe that all of the states are there. It can be Googled, or if you find it, Joan, that's wonderful. So yeah, I don't believe we listed all of the states that already support the national population.
I'll get it. I'll put it in chat.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. If there are not further questions, if Mary Jane Creary is here, I see her. Mary Jane, we would love to hear from you about criminal justice bills that you're following this session. You'll need to unmute, please. There we go.
Yes. Okay. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate all your good information. Thanks to Deb and to Joan for all their help. I did notice that somebody in the chat did ask about abolishing the death penalty bills, and I am going to talk about that. But first of all, I thought the priority ought to be the voting. So I wanted to mention specifically the SJ 272, which is the constitutional amendment that would just totally wipe out any qualifications except being 18 or over, a citizen of the United States, a citizen of the Commonwealth, and then registered to vote. Now, someone, and probably Julia mentioned this earlier, that there is a good place on the website for the legislature at the https://lis.virginia.gov/ where you can find out all kinds of really good information about the bills. So I would suggest, if you are interested in particular bills other than the ones that we are talking today, thank you, Joan, that you take a look at that, because that's where I found a lot of good information, because I'm fairly new to the Virginia stuff on this regard. So this bill right now, the constitutional amendment that pretty much wipes out all qualifications, is listed as being in the Senate Committee on Privileges and Elections. Now, just so you know, there are two other bills that deal with felony disenfranchisement. One is HG 546, HJ, and the other one is HJ 552. But they all have, they don't totally wipe out anything that the felons are having to do. The person generally has to finish their time, finish their qualifications that they have been given as part of their sentence, that kind of thing. But in the meantime, those two bills still mention that the governor has the right to restore the votes to those people. And having been involved in this in Fairfax County, I can tell you that there's a lot of interest among the people in the jails or who are out of the jails who want to have the right to vote restored, because also it goes along with other things, their right to serve on a jury, et cetera, et cetera. So I would suggest that you consider those. But in the meantime, the one that the League is focusing on, as was mentioned before, is SJ 272, which is sponsored by Senator Locke. Now, someone also asked about bills involving getting rid of the death penalty, and there are 5. I won't go into details about them except for one. One is HB 1779. Another one is HB 2263, SB 449, SB 802. The one that people are concentrating on, and the League has already, I think, testified in regard to this one, is Senator Surville's bill SB 1165. And that would get rid of the death penalty for all people who currently are under that problem right now. The other thing that I discovered is that there is also a new organization called the Virginia Progressive Prosecutors for Justice, who are supporting bills like this. So you might want to talk to your the local prosecutor, the head person, to see whether or not he or she would support such a bill. And in the meantime, that bill was referred to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and then it has also been referred to Finance and Appropriations, which I assume that means that there is some potential cost to being able to do this. Now, there are also some bills out there, and mainly one that deals with a mandatory minimum sentence. and people are concerned about those type of bills and sentences. So there is SB 1443 that would eliminate the mandatory minimum sentences, modify sentences to the term of confinement for felony offenses, and then under certain conditions, you can meet the requirements of this bill and if it passes. The other thing is that what's really good about it is that this bill is being supported by the Virginia State Crime Commission, and in the meantime has been referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. There are, let's see, excuse me while I look at my notes. There's a bill now that's just recently come up dealing with bail, and some of you may be in districts where the, in Fairfax County, where Steve Descano, the Commonwealth Attorney, is in favor of getting rid of cash bail. And that's a really interesting discussion about some really important things. And in fact, I think it was on Sunday's first page of the Washington Post, there was a really good article about the bail issue in Virginia. And right now it's in the House, as I understand it. And it's HB 652. Now, in regard to expungement, there are 6 bills dealing with people having their records expunged. They are House Bill 2113, and this one also has been recommended to be passed by the Virginia State Crime Commission. It's been referred to the Committee for Courts of Justice. There's SB 1264. It's in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. There's another one by the same author, sponsor, Senator Morrissey, in SB 1283, which deals with automatic expungement of criminal records. That's in the Judiciary Committee too, as I mentioned. Another one that's in Judiciary Committee is SB 1294, which deals with expunging police and court records, and then about fees that it may cost. Then another one that's been referred to Judiciary Committee also is SB 1339, again dealing with records and fees for that kind of thing. And then Senator Lucas has a bill called SB 1372, which deals with automatic expungement of criminal records. Then I want to mention that Representative Hope filed a bill this week dealing with the creation of the Office of Department of Corrections Ombudsman. So that would create a commission and then an ombudsman who would deal with issues, several issues that are put in the bill, and it also establishes a corrections oversight committee that would deal with the Department of Corrections, reports that have to be given to a lot of the senior people in the government and at the legislature, and then also provides for authority of the office to be able to investigate complaints that come from family members and others, so that people could feel like they might be able to get some help along the way. That again is House Bill 2325, and it's been assigned to the Public Safety Committee's Subcommittee on Public Safety. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you in regard to generalities for these particular bills has to do with all the committees. If you take again a look at online, you'll be able to find more information. But there are 4 important committees in the House and the Senate which deal with these particular issues. The Courts of Justice Committee in the House, which meets virtually again on Wednesdays and Fridays at 1 o'clock. The Privileges and Elections Committee in the House, and they have the subcommittee on constitutional amendments and other topics too, but they do not have a specific time when they're going to meet. They just say, you know, check here kind of thing. Then the Senate has a Judiciary Committee, as I've mentioned before. They meet Mondays at 8 a.m. and Wednesdays 30 minutes after adjournment. They do civil and criminal law and expungement bills. And then there is another Senate committee, Privileges and Elections, that meet on Tuesdays. And they deal mainly with voting issues. So that's all of what I wanted to mention, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are. And otherwise, thanks for your time and your interest. And as Julia mentioned, I am a member of the Justice Caucus, and there's lots of good information that comes out of being a member of that.
Thanks, Mary Jane. There is a question about expungement. Can you please explain expungement as it relates to criminal records? Do we want violent crimes to be expunged? Or are we talking about minor felonies?
Okay, I have not read the bills in detail. What I've gone off of is the summaries. So what I would suggest that you consider doing is looking at the bills in detail. But my understanding is that there are differing views in these bills about what kind of crimes / problems have been decided to be considered for expungement.
I would concur with what Mary Jane said. If you listen to the testimonies in committee and on the floor, you will hear quite a bit of debate about who should be have their records expunged and who shouldn't. And usually they look at what class felony that landed them into jail in the first place or prison.
Thank you all.
There was a question in the chat, someone who was saying, Sandra, I believe, was saying she was having difficulty both watching and listening and also writing down all of the bill numbers. Would you be willing to make available your bills list later? Perhaps Joan could send it around to those interested.
Sure. Yes, I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you so much. That's great. Oh,
there's also a question about the list of bills in which we testified. Yeah, we do have a list of, we have a Google Drive of all of our testimony, and we're collecting it as we go. So we should be able to make that available relatively soon. If all the testifiers give me that information, we will have a complete list.
Okay, thank you, Joan, because I have not been paying attention to what the league has been testifying about.
That's all the questions that I'm seeing in chat. I'm checking on Senator Ebbin. Senator Ebbin, are you here under a different name? Okay, he is not here yet. So we do have a few more minutes if anyone has questions of the advocacy crew.
And I'm just going to repeat our action website, which is LWV-VA.org/action. And there again, you can find talking points, you can find leave behind handouts. And also if you are on Facebook or Twitter, please make sure to find the league. It's generally LWV-VA, or on Twitter, it's at LWV-VA. And those accounts, the information and photos that you see there are great to share with your friends and spread the word about supporting voting and voters' rights, giving them reminders about voting registration that they can share with their friends. And yes, I will write I'm happy to write the action site in chat. Oh, we're also on.
I'm sorry, there is a question on the gun violence bills. We do have a gun violence committee issue group. There are several gun violence bills we are following. Does anyone have more information on gun violence?
Oh yeah, is Ruth Hoffman or Christine Payne in the room? They are our issue group leaders. And I know that Chris in particular has actually been working very hard on nursing and the vaccine effort, and yet also keeping track of these bills, which is absolutely phenomenal.
They both have day jobs, so they're not able to be here.
Okay, well, there are bills that are up today in the Justice Committee, and I would absolutely watch those bills. I think that we actually have really good chances of getting some additional gun safety legislation passed this session. And one bill that we in the League have been watching actually as it relates to voting, in addition to the regular gun safety bills, which are so important, is there's a bill from Delegate Levine, which would prohibit firearms within 40 feet of a polling place. And so far that bill is surviving and moving and doing well.
So I have pulled up an email from Ruth, and this is several days old, so you would need to check and make sure the current status of these bills. But she said there are 5 good gun violence prevention bills being heard in the House, and I will give you the bill numbers and let you see if they're still viable. But there's Levine's HB 2081, and that would prohibit anyone from carrying a gun into a polling place. There's a domestic violence one patroned by Delegate Murphy. That's HB 1992. A background checks by Lopez is HB 2128. Prohibiting ghost guns is Delegate Simon, HB 2276. And a bill about public carry into state buildings. That's HB 2295 from Levine. And I can put those in the chat. Oh, and here's one more. It's about background checks. That's SB 1250 from Senator Deeds. And I can put those bill numbers into the chat.
We have spoken of issue groups. I'm hoping Senator Ebbin is just a bit delayed. He did confirm Monday and Tuesday, but you know how things are when they're in session. They've been talking about these issue groups, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about them. These are groups that have been set up to assist the advocacy people. And by doing this, it's not just a few people trying to follow all these bills. As you can see, there are, zillions of bills on zillions of issues. And when you have a very, very short session, as we do, things move ridiculously fast. So these groups have 3 major roles. One of them is to look at our positions, because as Deb said, if you don't have positions, you don't have anything to advocate off of. So we need to keep our issues, our positions updated. We need to see if we need maybe more issues. Is there something that has come up that we do want to start advocating that there is not a national issue on? So we need to go look at it ourselves. So we currently have several issue groups that are up. That's the first job. The second job, of course, is to track legislation. This is pretty much what our meetings are doing now. I understand that Senator Ebbin is here, so I will yield the floor and come back to this later. Senator Ebbin? Give him a minute to unmute.
They need to unmute, yeah.
Yeah. Senator Ebbin, are you with us?
Senator Ebbin, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you yet. If you are able to unmute, that would be wonderful.
Okay, great. You can hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me today. It's a pretty fast-moving session. I just stepped out of a committee meeting in the Science Museum, a presentation. But as you may know, I'm on the Privileges and Elections Committee. Yesterday, we voted to establish the drop boxes and absentee ballot cure that we had during the most recent election to make those permanent. That's what the Senate Privileges and Elections Committee did yesterday. I had a bill that I think some folks were interested in on a national popular vote interstate compact. Unfortunately, I didn't have the floor votes for that, so I struck the bill. I have another bill that'll be up next week that I understand there was also some interest in to repeal the Virginia Marriage Amendment, which is inoperative and in conflict with the Supreme Court ruling that allows for same-gender marriage. This would remove the prohibition on same-sex marriage from the Bill of Rights and replace it with an affirmative right to marry for adults, regardless of gender, who are otherwise qualified. I'm very interested in your questions and available to take a few if that's your format. I don't know if it is, or if there are other topics in particular you'd like addressed.
Yes, sir. There is a question on strategy for the national popular vote. What are your recommendations on how we can assist, advocate, even if it is for next year, as it appears to be?
Well, to raise it during town meetings and such, and go to the National Popular Vote website, sign up for alerts. But you can't assume that every legislator or even every Democrat is for it. And I think it's important to advocate for it and to stress how it's a bipartisan measure that although two elections that would have been won by Democrats were in the popular vote were decided by the electoral vote in 2006. If former President Bush had lost Ohio, which he almost did, there would have been a similar result in a person who didn't win the electoral vote winning the popular vote. So I think we just have to keep advocating for it and not to assume that legislators are for it.
Thank you. There's a question on your constitutional amendment for marriage equality. Can you speak to that, please?
Sure. I think that I'm in a good position to pass it, and partly for clarity and also to make it clear to the voters when it gets to the ballot. I've also put in there that there'll be a committee substitute, that no minister would have to perform a wedding that they didn't want to perform. No religious person acting in their religious capacity would be required to officiate at any wedding. But the main thing is that all adults have a right to marry. I think that looks pretty good. I'm hopeful.
Thank you. There's also a question on the Virginia Voting Rights Act. How do we best advocate, and what do you see as the possibility for that?
With all of these, and I don't know if you're referring to Schuyler von Valkenburg's bill in the House or Senator McClellan's bill or Sia Price's bill, but we did pass a bill from Senator Jennifer McClellan yesterday that changes in election precinct locations, but further in methodology and voting would have to be run through the Attorney General's office, and they could either approve it or there could be a public notice and a public process where people could comment. That one passed the Senate yesterday, Privileges and Elections Committee. That's the McClellan version. I don't know if that's the name of the act that you're using or if that's a House bill.
There's also someone thanking you for your support of Senator Locke's SJ 272. There's hope that it would be reported out of committee soon.
Yeah, next week we're going to take up the constitutional amendments, and I assume that's the one that would restore voting rights to those who've been adjudicated as felons without a special process, that they would retain, that they would get their rights back upon end of their sentence. I believe it is.
Actually, that one, sir, is the one that would not take away their civil rights to begin with.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Okay. Well, I think it's a big step forward. And, you know, everyone's a citizen, even if they're have to pay a debt to society. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to pass that through.
Thank you.
I'm working on a number of other measures this year. I've got one for a two-term governor, which is going to be really tough because some people are not happy with the governor having used his authority during the pandemic in ways that they didn't agree with. I've also got a major bill to legalize marijuana with Senator Louise Lucas of Portsmouth, and a few other things I'm working on as well.
Great, thank you. I know you're busy. Do you have any other final words for us?
Just thank you for being here, and I appreciate members of the league being at the Privileges and Elections Committee meeting and participating remotely and commenting on bills that impact our ability to vote and making it easier to vote. So thank you for that, and thank you for all you do. Happy 100th anniversary.
Thank you so much. Senator, if I can ask you one more question. We do have a question
Sure.
about whether or not it is helpful to testify each time the bill comes up, or is once sufficient?
I would testify. You mean in subcommittee? Yes.
Yes, sir.
If you testified for a bill in the Senate, I would testify for it in the House as well. Typically, if a bill is discussed in a subcommittee, which we don't have in the P&E committee in the Senate, they don't take public testimony when it comes back to the wider committee. But it's important to be present, yes. You never know. Even if it's just saying the league endorses something, that means a lot to people.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Okay, well, have a great day, and sorry I can't stay with you longer today.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for all you do. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to issue groups. We have Senator Boysko coming in a few minutes. So if you see her, please holler. And so I will again be quiet. But the first rule of the issue groups is to study the positions. The second is to follow the legislation. And as we said, in a crazy session like this year, it is one that can change overnight, and then bills get melded, and it's a very difficult act to follow. So we rely on the issue groups to do that. And then, of course, as we've been talking about, is this public education aspect, because, you know, we're only in session 30, 45 days, and then you might have a special here and there. The rest of the time, we have to advocate and educate to people about our issues. And Pam brought up National Popular Vote Compact. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. What does it require? Is it a constitutional amendment? Is it overriding the Electoral College? So if we could advocate during the year about these things, then people will be, oh yeah, that bill, I know what that is when it comes up. So those are the three main goals. I'm going to run down quickly the groups that we have active, and then I'll put the link in, I think it's already been in, on how to find more information. But so far we have affordable housing, and these groups meet monthly. And affordable housing meets on the third Wednesday at noon. We have a campaign finance group. They're the second Wednesday at 2. Our DEI group meets second Tuesday at 2. Election security, third Friday at 1. Environment, first Wednesday at 6. Gun violence protection, second Monday at 7:30. Criminal justice, third Friday at 11. Redistricting currently meets every other Sunday at 3. I think you might be changing your time, Chris. I understand. Behavioral health, third Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Education, second Tuesday at 11. Childcare, third Wednesday at 1. Voter access, second Friday at 3. We don't have a time yet for domestic violence. There's a doodle poll out for people interested in that. We'll know soon. And we have a transportation group, and they have decided to meet quarterly on the third Wednesday of every third month. So again, we're going to put more information. You could find these times and the leaders and everything on the website. We'll put the link in there. But if anybody has any questions, we have about 5 minutes before Senator Boysko. If you have any questions for Julia or Deb or anyone else regarding advocacy, now is the time. Julia, there is a question about broadband. HB 1100 and 1800 are the big budget bills, which include funding for broadband. Oh, okay. Then there's a list of the other broadband issues on top. So it's not really a question, it's more information.
Yeah, she was asking if those are the broadband bills that I mentioned, and those look like the right ones. And you can go to our website that I keep repeating because I really love it, LWV-VA.org/action. And you'll see the broadband bills that I mentioned are listed there under the topic broadband. And we can add some more. There are quite a few of them this session, which is really heartening.
I know that this is about state advocacy, but this would be a moment to talk about what's going on at the national level. There are several members who are lobbyists for the National League, and our advocacy right now is on trying to think what the national ones are called, HJ1, or HR1. HR1, it's For the People Act. It's been introduced and passed a number of times by the House and stalled on McConnell's desk. And with the change in administration, it's been reintroduced now in the House. And it is an omnibus bill for voting rights and everything from soup to nuts. And I can find a link and put in the chat, but that is going to be our number one priority right now. And there is also a Senate companion bill. We expect that at the federal level that the Senate will partition their time between administration confirmations, perhaps at an impeachment trial. On the back burner would be judicial nominations, but at the same time, they will try to be moving forward on legislation. So just letting you know about that things will perhaps progress for voting rights at the national level this year. We will see.
There is a question about which issue group takes up national popular vote. That is voter access. That is co-chaired by Pam Bird and Don Craig. There is a subgroup on that. There's also a question, I guess, Deb, you'd probably be the best one for this. During the year while the issue groups are advocating generally, how do we determine where we can advocate using the League's name and when we cannot? I know that's a big issue, so.
Right. You are a constituent. And so if you wish to involve the League, you should probably reach out to your president or to, actually for the state level, it would be me. There's action you can do at the local level as well. Local leagues are responsible for school board, for board of supervisors, for mayors, or city councils, county councils, things like that. And I expect that our local leagues will be busy at the local level, and that would be an opportunity for you to get involved. But like we've been saying, there are things that can be done at the state level during the off season, and reach out to us. I'm being a little bit cagey because things are changing with the National League as well. Even for the federal advocacy that we do, we've been involving some state and local leagues. And as that's developing at the national level, that will help inform what we do at the state level. But we really are waiting guidance from them to see how we will interact leading up to now. We've been very what's at the local level is local, what's at the state level is state, and what's at the federal level is federal. And so as that's being blurred a little bit, we're waiting for guidance from them as to how we'll go forward with that. But I am a Lobby Corps volunteer, and because I'm also the state president, we have a board member who will take action for the state level too, will help represent the state, but expect us to be reaching out to local leagues as well as we interact with Congress people, because it helps to have a constituent. Even though I advocate for Alaska or Florida, it helps to have constituents from Alaska or Florida on those calls and in those meetings. So I hope that helped.
Senator Boysko is here, Deb.
Wonderful. Mary, would you like to introduce Senator Boysko, please?
Yes. Can you hear me? We welcome Senator Boysko. She's from the 33rd District, and she's on several committees: General Laws and Technology, Judiciary, Privileges and Elections, Rehabilitation and Social Services, and Transportation. And we're especially interested today in hearing her talk about broadband access. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's really good to be with you all today. I am in the Science Center right now. We are in session, and in the Senate, we're doing this in person. So I have my mask with me, but I'm in a room completely by myself. And just want to thank you all for inviting me to join you all today. In addition to the committees that I'm serving on, I'm also the chair of the Broadband Advisory Council, and have been working really closely with the administration, with the governor, and the business community and nonprofit communities to expand access to the internet and across the Commonwealth. You might have seen in the news this morning that another group of VADI grants have been disseminated and will be getting into the ground in all parts of Virginia to help get new broadband infrastructure installed from places that have no service at all. I am carrying two bills this year, one that will expand affordability to our students in our schools, and then another one that will make a pilot program working with our utilities to allow them to give middle mile broadband infrastructure, make that pilot program permanent. And I would be happy to talk with you all about both of the programs or answer questions that you have that I'm able to answer. Again, I'm not an expert, but I am really working on the policy side to try to implement this. So hopefully I can answer your questions. If you would like me just to review the two bills that I have, I'll be happy to start with that. So the first bill, which is really going to be transformative for expanding large portions of Virginia, is the bill that makes permanent the Smart Grid Community Connections pilot program. That pilot program was started in 2019 through the General Assembly, and it has given the ability for Dominion Energy and Appalachia Power to install additional broadband capacity while they're making their grid improvements around the state. And then they will lease that capacity back to the last mile providers. And so they have to go through the SCC to get approval. This actually is going to streamline that process and to make it easier and so it goes faster. But again, we will still have the safety measures and the stop gaps with the State Corporation Commission to make sure that they're going through the proper hurdles, that this is a fair and equitable process. We are also in that bill including our public providers, so our municipalities will be able to benefit from this as well. And we know that around Virginia, there's been a big interest in making sure both the public and the private sector are part of broadband in getting the service to our communities. These new projects would go to completely unserved areas, so that it would be places where there is no service right now. And again, we have the ability to help another 500,000 Virginians have access to, have access to the internet. And we know now more than ever that we need to have reliable broadband. The second bill, and I'm happy to take questions on that, I'll go ahead and go over the second bill as well right now, is really a clarifying bill that makes certain that schools know that they have the ability to partner with our private providers to get a much reduced service for people who are really struggling. This would allow them to enter into a partnership to have the most vulnerable students who are on free reduced lunch or SNAP benefits, $9.95 per month. And the program has been going on, so it's already in effect in the city of Roanoke, in Loudoun County, in Arlington, but there are some localities who don't believe that they have that they don't have the permission to work with these providers. And so this is really a clarifying bill. I'd also like to point out that municipal broadband companies and localities that own broadband already have this ability. They don't need to jump through any extra hoops. And so, of course, they can go into partnerships with their own school systems as well. There's been a little bit of confusion about that. I just, happy to answer any questions you all might have. But again, I think it's just really important that we're all working together to make sure that people have the ability to work from home, to have great meetings like this on Zoom and keep our communication systems working. And it's just been a real pleasure to be able to work with the companies and the private and the public providers, as well as Governor Northam, to try to expand access to the broadband. And I'm going to look at your questions now and see what questions, if anything, people have. And so let's see.
Yeah, Senator, most of the questions are about the bill numbers. That was.
Oh, okay. Good question.
And what are the objections to expanding broadband?
I don't think there. Yeah, so I don't think there are any objections to expanding broadband. What I think people want to make sure is there's a level playing field. And so the other night, with the utility bill that I have, it is SB 1413. The cable providers wanted some changes that the utility providers didn't want. And so up until 9, I was on a Zoom call with all of them until 9 o'clock, making sure as we went through amendments that were being proposed, to make sure that it was a fair process, to make sure that the SCC had ample time to really explore the applicants, and that they were going to do a thorough vetting, making sure that the private and the public providers would have access to these programs. So what I've really worked hard to do is to make sure that everybody understands the parameters and that their voices are heard. And so that's really been the only challenge that I've had with 1413. And when we voted in the subcommittee the other day, or actually I think it went to the full Commerce and Labor Committee, there were no objections from any of the stakeholders in the meeting, because we'd worked everything through and addressed their concerns in advance, which is what I always try to do. On the second bill, which is, and let me pull it up to make sure that I have the number right for you. 1225 at Senate Bill 1225. The question that I've gotten and I'm having a meeting actually with the people who've raised the question later today, I think at 10:30. the question has been basically a misunderstanding that somehow public providers would be left out of the ability to work with the school systems to get these, to leverage these discounted programs. And what I will say to you all, in case you've seen them on social media or anything, is I did some research and found in the code that public providers already have the ability to enter into agreements with their school systems, and they absolutely have no need for any sort of clarifying legislation. And the bill that I'm carrying, which allows the private providers to reach out to the school systems to communicate with their students, and allows them to pay for any mailings or any other sort of work, and work in concert with perhaps a charity organization to disseminate all that. The municipal broadband companies don't have any need to enter into, to get any additional legislation, because they already have that ability. The private providers, some of the school systems felt nervous about working with a private company. And so this is just a clarifying bill. And we'll make it easier for those schools. I already did this with Loudoun County earlier in the fall to put them together, and then the Loudoun County Community School Partnership came in and worked as kind of the middleman, and it's helping students get access to this $9.95 program. Additionally, my colleague Monty Mason is working on a pilot program that would help harness federal dollars to pick up that last $9, so that really these families could get free internet for the time while we're in this pandemic. And I think that's really important, that we're doing everything we can to make access and affordability to folks, so that the kids can stay in school and not have to struggle. This has been a really hard time for everybody.
Senator, there is a question about underserved areas. How are they being identified?
So it's unserved where there are mapping tools, and there's actually a bill, I think Delegate O'Quinn might have it, that is going to look at mapping the entire state so that we can really tell in a parcel by parcel. I think they use census data, and the state has, through the Department of Housing and Community Development, has these maps as well. We're always trying to refine them. The FCC also has these additional ones. One thing that's a bit of a challenge is that any census block that shows that some parts are served is sometimes seen as not being unserved, and so we need to really tweak that. The internet speeds, I think, is probably what you mean by talking about underserved, and there's not actually there's not a definition of underserved in Virginia. And I will continue to encourage and fight to make sure that we are expanding access that is actually meaningful. We go by a definition of 25 down speed, 10 up, which is what the FCC does. And in my utility bill that we're going to be passing, we're actually going to say that Virginia gets to make that decision that's best for Virginia, so that we can get folks all on board. The body grants that that are providing for these are addressing people who have absolutely no internet access, because recent studies have shown that there are 600,000 individual homes that are still completely without service. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody has something enough just for your basic internet needs that you and I all have, to be able to get on a Zoom or to watch Netflix. And then once everybody has that, then we will move on to the next tier of as the technology gets better, and we want to expand that for more people. It's a big problem though, and we're having to set priorities.
Thank you. There is a question regarding some sort of need possibly for a communication liaison between the communities and the providers. Is that something that's being looked at?
Well, if we're talking about the the internet providers. So we have a chief advisor of broadband in Virginia. His name is Evan Feynman. He is the staff person that I work with closely as the chair of the Broadband Advisory Council. And they have a monthly meeting with all of the providers throughout Virginia to share and disseminate information. It's hundreds of people, up to like 100 people are on that call monthly. And I join it whenever I can, just to make sure that I'm up to speed with what's going on. I think it's Commonwealth Connect. I think that might be the name of the, I'm sorry that I'm not certain that I have that name correct, but if you go to if you would want to go to, let me see if I can figure it out.
We'll find it.
Commonwealth. I think that's what it, but we have, yeah, it's the Commonwealth Connect Coalition, and it is a consortium of companies in Virginia that get monthly updates on what's going on. They share information and work as a hub with Evan Feynman. And I think if you go to it, it's virginiainteractive.org. I'll put this in the chat for you,
Thank you.
so that you can see it.
There's a question about, it says, can medical facilities like VCU help with funding expansions of broadband for telemed purposes? Is that something that can be worked in?
That is not something that I have been integrally involved in. Really what my role as the Broadband Advisory Council chair is in getting these body grants to the unserved and helping work on the policy around that for the governor. But we know that we need telemedicine and expand access to that. I'm absolutely supportive of it, and working with the hospitals and the medical community, I think is a great way of doing it.
Great.
And
thank you. I'm sorry.
I just am seeing that Sandra from Virginia asked how many students in Virginia have not had internet access since schools went down. And that's a good question. And I'm going to look at my notes because I think I've got information about that. Let's see. And I appreciate your flexibility and just letting me work through this with my notes. According to, so this was in 2017, 20% of students don't have, this was from 2017, 20% of Virginia's education department assessed that 20% of students did not have internet access outside of school. 6% were able to access the internet at a public library, and 5% had access after school at the school in their network. SHEV, the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia, has assessed that 1 in 5 students don't have internet that is either high-speed internet or computers at home. And 40% of students without broadband live near our cities. So, I mean, this has the capacity to help hundreds of thousands of students. And again, I don't have those numbers. I don't know that we have the numbers that talk about since the pandemic has hit, how many of those students there are. I don't have those up-to-date numbers, unfortunately.
This isn't a legislative question, but if anyone knows, there's a question on, is there a place we can donate the $9.95 for the students? I don't know if that's.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so most school systems around Virginia, local school systems, have a nonprofit partner that goes along with the school. And I would encourage you to reach out to your school system and make those donations directly to them. And I think that's a great way of helping to get those kids. So like I represent students in Loudoun County and Fairfax County, and the Education Association and the PTAs. I know that they're supporting these initiatives.
might be good places to start to get that information, or your school board would have that information, or your administration of the school system. Thanks for that question, though. Anybody else have a question? Or
I do not see any more. I know that this is not just a rural issue
right.
as well. And a lot of people up here in Arlington were quite shocked to learn how many of our students have to drive and sit in parking lots of libraries to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an important thing.
That's absolutely right. And one of the things that I have is saying that 40% of the students who don't have access to internet because of affordability live around cities. And so that's been something that I've been really concerned about. I represent some very diverse socioeconomic areas where there's huge poverty. And it's very important to me to see that we get, especially our Title I schools, all the students there being served equally and equitably. And I appreciate your interest and concern. I see that I'm supposed to end it at 10:10, and it is at 10:11. I'm just so grateful that we're able to do this together. And I think, you have 109 people on, which I think is more than we would get if you were actually here in Richmond. So maybe we should continue doing this, and want y'all to know that I am here to answer questions. I'll put my email address in the chat if I can be of assistance, but your advocacy means so much on so many issues. And I would just want to thank you all for being champions for Virginians.
Senator Boysko, thank you so much for your time, for your advocacy. This is such an important issue, and we truly appreciate all that you're doing to bring better broadband access to Virginians. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day, and I'll see y'all next time.
Is Delegate Scott? I don't see him on the list. Delegate Scott, are you here? Deb, we did have another question. I'm sure he's breaking away from a meeting on this whole issue of who do we speak for. A question did pop in before. When we speak today, when we go to these meetings, obviously the meetings are set up as the League of Women Voters, but who are we speaking for? There seems to be a question about the speaking for, if you could elucidate.
Sure. I think the first thing to note is that you are a constituent. You might say, I am a member of the League of Women Voters, and so I have brought the talking points from the League with us. You might give a little bit of history of the League about how we are 100 years old and that we reach our positions through informed study, but really speak to them as a constituent, as someone who is that they are representing you. That's why they were elected. And so you don't need to go there anonymously as a League member, but that's not why you're there. You're there because you are a constituent. And because you are a League member, you do have access to the valuable resources as a League member. Does that help?
I think that's a very helpful answer, Deb.
I think so, because there are no questions. So
Definitely keeping an eye out for Don Scott in the chat. But in the meantime, Joan, can you give the link one more time for people who want to, or I can put it in the chat, for people who want to sign up for the issue groups?
Yeah, I got it right here.
That is great. I've seen a lot of interest in that, and it's a really fun and interesting way to stay engaged. We've got so many great people working together.
If my fingers work, there we go. Okay. There it is.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that'll get you there. And then there's a little thing that says sign up here, and you click on it, it goes right to the Google group. Okay. Our keynote speaker will be here at 10:30. I don't know, do you want to take a break or have questions while we wait for Mr. Stratt? It's up to you.
I would say individually, if you need to take a quick break, that would be great. But because we don't know when the delegate might arrive, we don't want to all be on break and he's sitting here waiting for us. So if you need a break, take a break, but don't go too far because we do expect that Delegate Scott will be here as soon as he can.
I am texting them as we speak.
And perhaps we should have mentioned to Senator Boysko, although she doesn't have any control over it. Yesterday, we saw widespread outages on the East Coast with internet service that did affect our General Assembly. And so that could be something that you bring up to your representatives when you meet with them about how impactful that is to everyone when broadband is not something that is accessible.
That's right. And in fact, there is a problem with competition in Virginia. And it says this on our broadband fact sheet that almost half of Virginians live in an area that has 1 or 0 internet service providers, which means that almost half of Virginians have no option or no option to switch. So if you don't like your provider, that is your provider. It's essentially a monopoly in your area. And so that's another issue as well. We do have some interesting stats about broadband on the sheet. We also know that approximately 306,000 Virginians don't have access to any wired internet options at all. And generally that is often where the highest speeds come from, is wired internet. And approximately 660,000 Virginians don't have access to any high quality data connections, which can lead to people calling into Zooms as opposed to using video. And while that works, it's not the full experience. And then 48.7% of Virginians don't have access to affordable broadband internet. And that goes to what Senator Boysko was mentioning about her constituents. She has so many who, and they're throughout the Commonwealth, who simply cannot afford high-speed broadband. And now when this is the main way that people are connecting outside of their own homes, it's super important. We actually have some wonderful anecdotes from League members regarding the importance of broadband in education, in telemedicine, including behavioral health meetings, and also just the fact that you need a line of sight. So one of our members who lives in Fauquier County mentioned that in her area, if you want high-speed broadband, you generally have to use a satellite dish. And so there's a cost attached to getting a satellite dish and a subscription. And also sometimes people live in a valley, or they have tree coverage and therefore they can't get internet for those reasons. So wired internet would resolve that sort of a problem if it could reach their areas. And I see Carol Proven has put exactly that comment in the chat, and she's in Prince William. Have to connect Zoom without video because the satellite service is so poor. I know that a factor with satellite is a latency, meaning that there are delays. So carrying on a Zoom conversation could be very difficult because the signal has to transfer from your computer up to a satellite, tons of miles up in the stratosphere, and then down to someone else's computer, and it takes longer than zipping through wires that are right here in Virginia. So satellite can be tough.
Hi, excuse me, Judy. I just heard he is trying to sign on as we speak, speaking of broadband. Nancy Brown does have a question, however. She says, if we only have 10 minutes this afternoon, do we hit all of the talking points? Obviously, I guess you have to pick and choose what's important to your league and to you. That would be my advice, but you all can add on.
I would concur. Sometimes if your lawmaker has time or they're engaged, they may allow more time. So prioritize the ones that are most personal to you, or you think would have the most impact. And then if you do have more time, you can hit some more. You can also follow up in an email, which you always should, thanking them for the time that they did give to you. And you could hit any of the other issues you didn't have time for then.
Yeah, I agree. And you do want to keep emails targeted, although you can attach information, but they don't have time to read really lengthy emails generally. So try and keep it kind of short, cordial, but snappy. But you can attach resources like our fact sheets.
Right, I think I just dropped the link back in with has all the fact sheets. Yeah, personally, what we're doing in Arlington is I'm going to do like 2 seconds for each person. I have a little list, you know, of what they have introduced, and you know, we thank you for this. And then I'm going to turn it over to the people who are with me, you know, my members, and give them a few minutes to talk because they just don't want to hear from one person. So it gives them more time. Well, I guess speaking of broadband, he must be having trouble. So, you know, it is what it is. We do have a couple issue group people here. I hate to put people on the spot, but you know, why not? Are there any issue group leaders here who want to put in a few words about what they're doing? Oh, come on. Your lead members. You could talk.
Okay, Joan, this is Janet Boyd. I can just give a quick overview of what's going on with campaign finance, although I thought that Julia did a great job this morning describing the 2 bills that we're focusing on. But just to let you know, this afternoon, the House Appropriations Bill, House Appropriations Committee will be reviewing the Bulova study bill. I fully expect it'll make it through. So watch very carefully the floor action, because we would expect soon that the first reading on the floor will occur, and then it'll go up the steps. And with Chairman Simon supporting Delegate Bulova's bill, I think there's a good opportunity for both that bill plus Simon's bill on personal use of campaign funds. I think both of them will make it through. So thanks for that opportunity.
Can I just give a shout out to the voter access group and subgroups? I am really impressed with the work that they've been doing with Pam Berg as the coordinator. And it's just great to see these teams of people doing research, writing up talking points and sharing them. And then also I'm impressed with the people that have been testifying. We've had several of our members give some really great testifying, and including Janet Boyd, thank you, on campaign finance.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. It's been a lot of fun. This is our first session of having the issue group set up. So I'm really happy with the structure that we have so far, you know, reaching down into the state leagues, pulling up information for leadership, or having leadership provide us information and having it distributed throughout the league. So I've really enjoyed it. And my co-chair is Don Craig. So yeah, thank you, Voter Access and Voter Services for everything you all are doing. Thank you.
You guys have some subgroups too, right? You have broadband, you have national popular vote, you have several subgroups.
Yes, we do. And of course I should have a list in front of me, but I don't. But it's, yeah, we have a ballot curing, the witness removal, a broadband NPV, I know I'm leaving some out. Pre-clearance, stuff like that. And that allows, those little subgroups allow, a couple people to focus on just one issue, because your head would explode if you, had to do everything. But it allows for that, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 people focusing on that one issue, and you can get into detailed research. And along those lines, I also want to just mention, while I have the opportunity, you don't have to be an expert. Seriously, I didn't know yet. I didn't even know who my state legislator and state senator was. I didn't know I had one of those until 2 years ago. It's a little bit embarrassing, but if you're not, don't feel like you have to be an expert. You do not, and just jump in, and we'll help you along. Thank you.
Just to add, I think that we really have to give huge props to all the members of the subgroups, because they came on board and then just ran with it. They were like, really investigating and researching and really just touching bases with each other and carrying on and just feeding back the information. So I give them all the applause for what they're doing, because without them, they make me and Pam look good, because, they are doing the work, the hard work of it. And like for myself, this is the first time I've ever testified, and at first was kind of nervous, but then after going on and doing it, it's like, oh, this is kind of cool, and especially with all the talking points that you have and information, and I think that the ones that I've been on, and I've testified, I think when you show your passion around it, the legislators see that. I've been on several where they really, heard some great stories. And I think that personal touch really adds a whole lot. So again, just all the thanks to all the members that have stepped up. I know it can get overwhelming, but like I said, you just take a little piece of it and then kind of gradually, move up and keep going.
Thank you all. Oh, go ahead, Beth.
Second, I could say something about the child care issue group.
Okay, maybe 1 minute for Beth and then 1 minute for Lisa, and then we'll go to our keynote speaker.
Okay, so our child care issue group is a new group and doesn't seem to have a lot of people in it. And I've been thinking about that child care is considered a priority at the national level, and why there's not a whole lot of interest. And I think part of it is that actually the issues are very complex. And I appreciate what Dawn just said about taking an issue and just take a little piece. But my mom was in the league. My mom was very active in the league, and I've only recently in the past few years been in the league. And I know that she used to talk a lot about good government, and that the league advocated for good government. And that's one of the challenges of the childcare policy, is there's a lot, there are people, state senators and legislators who are advocating for more childcare policy programs. But I think the tricky part is making sure that it's good government, and that if government has more control over childcare, that it's quality childcare. And I'd love it if more people were interested and could kind of work on this and discern some of these issues.
I'll speak for a moment about the election security issues group. The issues group is not focused specifically on any of the legislation, because the legislation that is of interest to us really dovetails in the way we approach those pieces of legislation with the way the voter access and voter services issues group is approaching them. They're looking at it obviously from the perspective of the voter, and we're looking at some of the same issues, such as the witness signature requirement and the drop-off locations requirement that we advocate for. from the perspective of election security. And what our conclusion is that neither of these things jeopardize election security. So there's really no conflict in our approaches on these. And we have that territory is being occupied more by the other issues group. What our members are interested in is such things as risk limiting audits and educating voters about how to vote securely. Voter education is something that goes on all the time, not just during a legislative session. We need to develop a program. As far as risk limiting audits, Virginia is going to be conducting the first ever statewide audit in February. After that, we believe that the stage will be set to amending audit laws. There are no amendments before the legislature at this time, because we need to get a really solid base of support within the elections community. That includes the registrars and the electoral board members, in order to make the risk limiting audit process, which is a way of confirming that the outcome was correct without doing a whole recount of an election. And if that can be embedded in the system in Virginia in such a way that it could satisfy voters that our elections are accurate and improve the faith of voters in our elections, that will be a huge step forward in terms of elections in Virginia. And it's something that we're going to be working on in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. And now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Adele McClure grew up impoverished in Alexandria, Virginia, where she was homeless for a time. She graduated from West Potomac High School in Fairfax County and from Virginia Commonwealth University School of Business with a Bachelor's of Economics degree. At VCU, she participated in over 22 university organizations, committees, and task force. She served as student body president from 2010 to 2011 and was the 2011 recipient of the VCU Division of Student Affairs Distinguished Service Award. Other awards include the VCU Alumni 10 Under 10, the University Leadership Award, the University Service Award, and the Monroe Park Campus Student Government Association Christopher Mays Award. In 2010, she co-created VCU Quitar Day, an annual cultural event awareness event. After graduating, Adele took a job with the Nonprofit Association of the United States Army, and in 3 months went from an administrative assistant to supervisor. She has worked on developing policy initiatives and designing and implementing 3 statewide roundtables on evictions. In 2010, she held the position of Program Policy Director for the Office of Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, where she worked to raise statewide awareness of housing issues such as evictions and bring support and legislation to the problem. After leading the Lieutenant Governor's staff, she worked to coordinate efforts on reducing and preventing evictions with the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development. In 2019, Adele was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and in 2020, she was elected to the Forbes Under 30 Global Board. In October of 2020, Ms. McClure was named Executive Director of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. And I saw a tweet last night that she is also the Vice Chair of the African American Legislative Staff Coordinating Committee of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. In my personal interactions with Adele, I found her to be very warm and thoughtful, and it is my delight and pleasure to introduce Adele Clark.
Wow, thank you so much, Deb, for that generous introduction. I absolutely appreciate that. And Joan and all of you for inviting me to spend some time with you. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for your hard work, your advocacy, and tireless efforts to empower voters and defend our democracy. We would not be here if it were not for your hard work and efforts. And so again, my name is Adele McClure, and I have the honor and pleasure of serving as Executive Director of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. And I decided to work for the VLBC because its mission, vision, and legislative agendas aligned with what I am so very passionate about. And in my role, I work with our 23-member caucus, the most members we've ever had since Reconstruction, to create our legislative agendas, to get our agenda items passed, and partner and work with organizations and advocates and institutions and groups around the Commonwealth. And so we work to root out and end systemic racism. We work to expand access to fundamental human rights, to education, and to housing. We work to implement criminal justice reform and policing reform, and we work to create and provide economic security and opportunity while helping to close the income, wealth, and equality gap. And so our members have worked alongside many organizations, including League of Women Voters of Virginia, to advance measures to protect and defend our democracy, to expand access to the ballot box while stopping voter suppression. And in addition to my work with the Caucus, I have the honor of serving as my precinct's Deputy Chief Election Officer. And so in this role, I get to work to protect the right to vote on the ground inside of polling locations. And so this past November, I worked the polls and was proud to do everything I could to keep voters and poll workers safe during this pandemic. And I was so happy to see that a large percentage of the voters in my particular precinct had voted, and they voted early because together we expanded more options to vote here in Virginia. But despite these successes, as you know, more needs to be done to expand access to the ballot box across our Commonwealth. And at the same time, the right to vote has been under attack for generations in this country, including our recent history when our nation was founded. Black and brown individuals were denied access to the voting booth. It was only through long fought struggle and sacrifice from brave activists that the right to vote was expanded and its protections better enshrined. With the 15th Amendment, we saw the right to vote expanded to Black men, but in theory, not in practice. And with the 19th Amendment, we saw the right to vote expanded to women. But during this time, Black men and women were still violently denied access to the ballot box through Jim Crow laws. Still, in the face of this oppression, we saw brave men and women stand up, march, and demand their sacred right to vote. These civic actions resulted in the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, which enshrined even more protections for Black men and women at the ballot box. Yet this was far from the end of the struggle. And in 2013, the US Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. Soon after, we saw states across the country begin to introduce age-old voter suppression methods and some new voter suppression methods as well, from voter ID requirements to shutting down voting locations in Black and brown and low-income areas. We saw this attack on the right to vote in our democracy itself accelerate to tragic results under the Trump administration. We had a president who fanned the flames of conspiracy theories that justified attacks on the right to vote, that justified opposition to making voting easier, that sanctioned acts to disenfranchise Black, brown, and low-income voters. This culminated in violent insurrection on January 6th of this year, as extremists physically attacked and occupied the Capitol building and delayed the certification of the electoral vote. And so for now, our democracy survived, and of course it prevailed. The votes were counted and the voice of the people was heard. But these tragic events reminded us that democracy is fragile and the right to vote is sacred, and it must be vehemently defended and protected. It reminded us that now we must stay vigilant to ensure that the right to vote is protected and that access to the ballot box is expanded, that the process of voting be made easier. Last year, we had a number of wins on the voting rights front. We made Election Day a state holiday, replacing Lee Jackson Day. We expanded early voting, implemented no excuse absentee voting, ensured mail-in ballots postmarked on Election Day would be counted, and more. And of course, this year, we have so much more to do. In this session, there are a number of bills aimed at protecting the right to vote and expanding access to the ballot box. And we have bills that would implement a state-level Voting Rights Act in Virginia that would introduce early Sunday voting, that would improve access to curbside voting. We have bills to eliminate the witness signature requirement for absentee voting and designate a portion of June and July as Liberty Amendments Month, which honors the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments to the US Constitution. And this is in addition to a whole host of other bills moving through the General Assembly right now. It is absolutely pivotal for us to use every avenue, every juncture, every opportunity to guarantee access to our fundamental right to vote. And in addition to democracy and civil rights, the VLBC has focused on a holistic approach to end systemic racism. We set forth a comprehensive 8-point agenda, which you should have on your online folder today. And it includes a number of measures focused on digital rights and providing broadband access and expanding that to bridge the digital divide, recognizing that racism is a public health crisis, measures expanding justice and policing reform that includes marijuana legalization, abolishing the death penalty, automatic expungement, ending qualified immunity, and the practice of solitary confinement. We have measures supporting, protecting our workers, especially through this pandemic. And we have measures expanding economic security and opportunity to Virginians, expanding housing access and strengthening eviction protections to mitigate this crisis instead of exacerbating it further. And measures increasing access to healthcare and essential services, and increasing access to education and supporting Virginia's children, and pushing for environmental justice, transit improvements, and promoting public safety. So I look forward to finding additional ways to collaborating with you all on these important measures. And again, I thank you for all that you're doing, your tireless hard work and advocacy. And I look forward to speaking with you further, answering any questions that you may have. And if I do not have the answers, then I am happy to get that information to you later or point you in the right direction. And so I know together we can work to ensure our democracy is protected and the right to vote in Virginia stands a sacred pillar in our precious democratic system. And with that, I'd like to welcome any questions at this point and hope to speak with you further on this important issues.
I don't see any questions in chat. You covered it all.
Someone asked what my day at work is like. Julia? So that's a hard question to answer. So many people ask me that, especially throughout the year, right? When we're in the off session. And I mean, many of you know, we have not had a break from the last session, and then we rolled right into pandemic response, and then we rolled right into the protests and reckoning with our past in the past 400 years. And then we rolled right into special session to address so many overdue measures. And then from there, we rolled right into session prep, and now we're in session. So it's been nonstop. And so my day can consist of many different things, right? It could be speaking with organizations about the work that we're doing, or gathering community input on certain bills or resolutions, gathering ideas, speaking with different stakeholders on bills. I know one day I spent, and I know Deb can attest to this, one day I spent a lot of time in the special session ensuring that we had protections within the budget language to strengthen evictions and to keep people from being evicted during this pandemic and further exacerbating the pandemic, right? Because we don't want to put people on the streets. How can someone stay safe? How can someone continue to wash their hands if they don't have a home or a roof over their heads? And so that's completely fundamental. So my day consisted of literally being in the weeds, helping to write the language within the budget. And then I have another day where it just consists of, you know, getting our members together, gathering consensus on issues, talking out, you know, what we're going to do moving forward on some things. And, you know, some days it consists of, you know, writing and trying to put together our legislative agenda. We have many different voices. As you all know, we are not monolithic. And so there are so many different ways. We all have the same goals, but so many different ways that people, you know, have and ideas that people want to, you know, to implement to achieve that goal. And so, you know, it's that. And then I have, you know, other times where I'm filing our financial reports. So I make sure that we are financially compliant with Virginia state code and law and, you know, comms, all that stuff. So I'm writing press releases. So my day is all over the place. I wear many hats. In addition to this role, I also serve on many different community boards, serve on the community services board, I serve on many boards dealing with addressing issues that people are facing when experiencing homelessness, a lot of regional boards. And then as you heard before, there's a Forbes board. So it's kind of all over the place. And I also serve on a board that's dedicated to paying our interns nationally. So anyone that that works with me, I never like to say for me, but with me, because I believe it's a partnership. I make sure that they're paid, and I make sure that the relationship between me and the intern or whoever we are hiring is mutually beneficial. And so, we pay our intern at a rate of $15 per hour. So we like to walk the walk that we're talking.
There is a question and a comment about it's nice to see Ida B. Wells looking over your shoulder.
Oh yeah.
But what do you see as the biggest challenges to collaboration and compromise on your agenda with different groups?
Yeah, and also in addition to Ida B. Wells, we have the late Congressman John Lewis over here, and we have Bayard Rustin up here, a bunch of heroes of mine. So, I mean, there are many different challenges, right, to building not just consensus among members of the General Assembly or members of the Legislative Black Caucus, but members of the community and members of organizations. And so I think that the key is communication, open communication. I absolutely love talking to people. I love both being in the weeds and high level overview of things. And so I always, like I said, I always feel like communication is absolutely key to addressing any challenges, around collaborating and building consensus. So as long as we keep that open, as long as we have an understanding, we're respecting one another, I feel like that is, for me, a great way to address those challenges.
We have a housing question from Alice. Is the caucus supporting all of the VPLC tenant rights bills?
Absolutely. And we work very closely with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. Housing is my wheelhouse and expertise. So I have actually worked with them to create a lot of those ideas. And so we absolutely endorse their agenda. We have a lot of our members who are carrying those measures. And we have, members outside, or General Assembly members outside of the VLBC who are carrying some things that I personally wrote. So really excited to continue pushing for the expansion of tenant rights.
There is, by the way, a list. Someone's asking about a list of the bills in the Google Drive that you all received. The legislative priorities for the caucus are in there. Adele sent that over, so it's in there for you to look at. There is a question about history. In addition to the governor's work to get more accurate history taught in our schools, are there specific things that citizens can do to ensure that history is actually taught accurately?
Yeah, and there are many different thoughts coming to my mind about this question. I always talk to people about talking to their local school boards, working to ensure that we are just completely addressing that revisionist history that made it into our textbooks, that made it into the curriculum. And so, always talking to folks on the local level, talking to friends and family, addressing things that come forward that are completely revisionist and not historically accurate. And then also to make sure that we're sharing resources and texts and other things that have gone kind of like unnoticed or buried that we hadn't learned in the past. And so there are so many different things you can do on a personal level, things you can do on the local level, on the state level. I believe, I'm not sure if the work group, I believe that there is an opportunity, maybe an opportunity for giving public comment or, talking to the people in that particular group. So that is something that I would tell people as well, to kind of provide input, and just talking to, like I said, local, state, even national reps about ensuring that our history is accurately taught. Because we usually go with Black History Month, or we have months for different races and ethnicities throughout the year, but it's always a flash in the pan. It's always like a quick highlight, or it has been whitewashed in our education system. And I think that we're getting better, but we just have to continue to put the pressure on and push for things to be accurately taught. So if anyone sees anything, I always say to say something and address it to the respective folks who are in charge of that.
There's a question about, are you involved with the Multifamily Energy Efficiency Coalition?
Let's see. I don't know if I haven't spoken. Maybe I have. I've spoken with so many people over the past couple years. But that name, I don't think I've spoken with anyone specifically, but I know my members probably have. So if anyone has anyone, or if there's anyone here from that coalition that wants to reach out and speak with me further, please feel free. I'm completely open. I love, like I said, love talking to people, love hearing different perspectives. Also love hearing about, what bills are important to you. And in addition to that, what bills we should flag, right? There are so many different bills that we want to make sure those with, unintended consequences or anything like that, that we want to make sure we flag and address.
We've gotten several questions that I probably need to bring Deb and Julia in on. How do we effectively collaborate or coordinate our efforts with yours? And I think we're doing that to a degree, but if you want to start, and I'll bring those two in as well.
Yep. So I actually, let me see, I should have brought that over ASAP. Now I'm trying to get the link for you all. I should have given that to you. But we actually have a survey. Let me go find it really quickly. That I developed, and this is more so for individuals, groups who want to help out and receive any kind of action alerts that we have on particular bills. So I think that's one way to collaborate. Another way is just to keep the line of communication open. I think, just consistently talking with one another. And hold on, let me send you this link so I make sure everybody has it. And you can also send this to friends and family who want to get involved with the agenda, or it can be particular pieces of the agenda, or it can be the entire thing. So let me get this link for you all. But like I said, I think consistently communicating with one another and finding ways to collaborate is absolutely, the best way.
There is a question, of course, this is the lead, about fair voting and accuracy. I'm sorry, Deb and Julia, I mentioned I was going to bring you guys in on that if you had any more, and I forgot.
I would just add that Adele and I do talk. If there's an issue that we want to bring up with each other, we do connect with each other and have those conversations. We've talked about affordable housing and perhaps the possibility of doing a forum. We were waiting for our study to be completed so that we could do that. And we've talked about, in particular, SJ 272. And while we don't oppose automatic restoration of rights, of course we support that, we don't want to see them taken away in the first place. So how do we accomplish that goal?
Okay, thank you. There's one question on voting rights, but there's also a question. You said June, July, 13, 14, 15, 19. There was something going on?
Yeah, so we have a resolution filed by Senator Locke and Chairman Bagby, and it's called Liberty Amendments Month. And both of those resolutions would recognize a period between June and July as Liberty Amendments Month, honoring those amendments.
Okay, thank you. And as I was saying before, this is the lead, so there's a question on fair voting and secure voting and what your efforts are on that legislation.
Yeah, so I know my members are ensuring all the time that they put forward some legislation to make sure that there is safe and fair voting, and then also flagging any voter suppression efforts that we may have seen, and especially coming through the General Assembly. So I can get detailed information about votes. Hold on, let me write that down. Safe voting. But that, I mean, that is an absolute priority for us. Safe voting and fair measures. Yep.
You mentioned racial impact statements. Somebody said that's a very interesting concept. What would that entail, and who might do them?
Yeah, so that would be JLARC, and let me bring up that specific bill. Delegate Aird is carrying the racial impact statements in coordination with the Commonwealth Institute. So let me bring that up. Hold on.
Can you
And I'll tell
explain
you the
what
exact.
JLARC is, just in case people don't know?
Yep, let me bring up the exact bill. 1 second, sorry. Because I want to make sure that everybody has the bill number 2, because you can look at literally all of the details associated with the bill. Let's see. Now I'm having trouble finding. Oh, here it is.
The
Okay.
Zoom gods.
So I'm actually trying to look up on my phone the exact number. So it's HB 1990, and so it provides that the chair of the House Committee for Courts of Justice and the chair of the Senate Committee on Judiciary may request the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, which is JLARC, to review and prepare racial and ethnic impact statement for proposed criminal justice bill to outline its potential impact on racial and ethnic disparities within the Commonwealth. So it requires JLARC to provide copies of the impact statement to the requesting chair and patron of the proposed bills. So that would be the racial impact statement. I think that will be absolutely key to ensuring that we're not passing any bills with any sort of unintended consequences or, terrible impacts on racial and ethnic, folks in the Commonwealth.
You said that was HB 1990, correct?
Yeah, HB 1990 by Delegate Aird.
This is probably the toughest question. How do you deal with someone who seems to be totally closed-minded? How can we possibly open minds?
Yeah, that is a tough question because, and I myself have been dealing with some personal friendships of folks who are closed-minded, especially following the insurrection, which I thought would open minds a little more to me telling people, why so many things were problematic in the past 4 years. And so I think, number one, I always push communication, right? It's been a theme in what I've talked to you about today, communication, and first having the conversation, right? Like seeing what exactly they're closed-minded about. Why are their minds closed to the particular issue that you're bringing forward to them? And then finding ways to address the issues or the talking points that they're bringing forward. And so I always like to come with data, and and I always like to, especially if I'm coming to speak with this person who's particularly closed-minded on a particular issue, I like to know ahead of time what the talking points are. And if the talking points include a ton of misinformation, if they include a ton of misguided or inaccurate statements, then I already come with things to rebut them before they can say them to me. And so I think that that's a way, that's a good way to kind of address their main concerns. If their main concerns are valid, but you just don't agree with them, I think it's important to say, okay, that concern is valid, I get that, and then give your viewer perspective. So, but some people are just going to completely close themselves off to you, and that is, it just depends on the level that you want to interact with this person. Like, some people I just won't tolerate, like fascists or people who are completely racist and support insurrection and all that stuff. And so those people need to be held accountable. But people who are closed-minded because they have certain things that they have grave concerns about, I think it's important to talk about I think it's important to share your perspective in a respectful way and manner. And in my experience, people that have been completely closed-minded have opened their minds, because I didn't come at them insulting them or immediately coming out negatively and attacking their personal character. And a lot of times when people argue with you or debate, they like to deflect onto something that is about you or something you think. And so I always try to ignore the talking points that they bring forward to bring you down a rabbit hole. And I try to bring it back to the whole point of what we were talking about. And so that's where I found myself successful in getting through to someone who was closed-minded on a particular issue. I think I had a direct question from someone.
Oh, okay.
Let me see. Someone said, are the housing bills fair to landlords as well? If so, how? Yes. So in all of the housing bills, and especially, legislators encourage this as well, we want all stakeholders to be at the table, to give their perspectives, their views. And so when creating these bills or supporting these bills, we want to make sure that we're not, trying to put landlords out of pocket. Like, for example, eviction, strengthening eviction protections, right? Evictions are expensive and detrimental to both the landlord and the tenant. It's not good for anybody. And, obviously there's a power imbalance there where if the tenant is affected by the eviction process, the tenant may be more affected by the eviction process because they have what they call the Scarlet E on their record. And it may put them into, spiraling housing instability. And on the landlord side, there's fees associated with it. There's, time to take folks to court. You have a vacancy in your unit while you're trying to evict someone. It's just not great all around. So the bills that we try to implement are common sense measures that either give someone a little more time to, engage in a payment plan to get the landlord their money back in what, the terminology is to be made whole, so that they can, pay their bills, as opposed to, taking it through court. And then also, there is a rent and mortgage relief program that exists that we have worked so hard to stand up in the Department of Housing and Community Development in partnership with Virginia Housing. And that gets the landlord their money if someone cannot afford to pay their rent, especially during this pandemic. And we have worked to make it easier for landlords to get this money, to get this financial assistance, by allowing landlords to apply themselves on behalf of their tenants. And so if a tenant doesn't apply for the program, then the landlord can apply on their behalf. And then if the tenant is non-responsive in terms of providing the documents needed to participate in this program, then at that point, the landlord can evict. So there are many different safeguards in place before, someone can just immediately evict someone. I don't think that should automatically be the default. That has been the practice in this country for too long. And I think that we must find ways to keep people in their homes and keep the landlords whole by getting them the arrears and the money that they're owed, without putting an eviction on somebody's record. Let's see. I don't think I have any other questions here.
No, there are none.
I'm sorry. Someone asked if we were partisan. So if you were to look at our Twitter, you would probably think that we are. And that is because all of our members are Democrats. But we are not partisan in nature, because if there were someone who was elected to the General Assembly who was African American and became part of the caucus, then we would have Democrats and Republicans, and you would start to see our social media and communications reflect the diversity of the membership. And so, but not in a way where we would support and push things that would harm the mission of the caucus. So, and the mission of the caucus is to improve conditions for African Americans and people who are disadvantaged historically across our Commonwealth, and improve those conditions socially, economically, politically, what have you, right? So as long as whatever we're sharing from that particular individual doesn't harm or negate our mission, then you would start to see our communications reflect, like I said, the diversity of our caucus.
Oh, one question did come in. Do you advocate for abolishing interest on housing units and or homes?
So I haven't advocated for this particular measure. I have definitely heard of folks mention it, and I want to learn more. So is it Aisha or Aisha? If you want to reach out to me and talk to me more about it, please do so. Love to hear your perspective on this. Love to hear what you're seeing, or any articles or points that you've seen on this particular thing. And one thing I love is, if there isn't an idea in the General Assembly, and I think Pam had mentioned earlier on this call when I got on earlier that folks who are new to this space, and if you don't necessarily know who your legislators are, I always think it's so cool that you can immediately come in as someone who's a newcomer to this particular space, learn the process relatively quickly, and provide an idea that can then quickly become law. So one of our members, Delegate Sam Rasool, had someone within his district come forward with a bill, and it was related to housing, and it was ensuring that someone who was a survivor of domestic or family abuse wouldn't be discriminated against when looking for housing based on their status as a survivor. And so someone brought that forward from his district. He had a You Write the Bill event. And so she came forward and she had the idea, and we ran forward with it. I testified on the bill, we got it passed. And so it was just so cool. I think some of my favorite ideas are like the grassroots ideas that come through the General Assembly, which are most of them. They always come from people who have ideas about something that they've been experiencing personally or they've seen happening in their area. Do I support reducing school loans? So Sonia, are you referring to the national or the federal cancellation of school debt? Or yes, then absolutely. That's exactly, here, let me give you my email address. I absolutely support that. So many people are in crippling debt. And I mean, this is my personal view. I just feel like education should be free. Like, I feel like it's a right, and some folks may not agree with me here, but I just feel like we need to do better in improving access and resources when it comes to education. So I think it should be free. I don't think we should have to go into debt in order to access education. And there's so many people whose zip codes depend, or whose education depends upon the zip codes that they live in. And I don't think that's fair. So, education has helped me escape poverty into the middle class. And, not everybody is going to go into a higher institution, but there should at least be some sort of skills program or something that people can access, across this nation. So that is just my high level perspective and view on that. And someone mentioned Professor Desmond's book, Evicted. Yeah, so I did read that book. Let's see, wasn't that enough? Yeah, yep. So my mom is on a housing choice voucher, which has been absolutely key to her during this pandemic, because she was an early childhood educator for 10 years and lost her job at the start of this pandemic. And if she didn't have that voucher, I don't know where we would be right now. So there's a lot that needs to be done to expand access to that and to improve and expand access to public housing. So just my personal opinion. Oh, wow. Yeah, Denise, paying student loans since 21, that's unacceptable. So we definitely have to do better.
I guess there's one more question, and then we probably have to let you get back to work, but are there any national level issue groups as well? And maybe that's a league question and I can answer after we've thanked you. But thank you so much, Adele. Appreciate your fielding all of our wide spreading questions and your expertise on so many topics and your openness. Truly do appreciate you and all that you do for all of Virginia.
Oh, I appreciate you all as well. I truly, truly do. And really reach out to me anytime if anyone wants to have one-on-one conversations. If maybe during session, I may not be as responsive to the one-on-ones, but I will try my best. But after session, absolutely willing to meet with anyone. So
thank you.
Of course. Have a good one, y'all.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
So Sheila, to answer your question about national issue groups, often these will form around the time of the national convention. There will be caucuses, and there are some caucuses right now on a number of issues. And so if there is one in particular you're interested in, I would say reach out. I don't know if there's anybody on national I would connect you to, but reach out to me and we'll find out. Delegate Scott was in the room and I don't know if he is still here. I don't see him.
No, Deb, I just got a message that he had to go to another committee meeting. The one that he was in ran over and he tried to come on and it's a crazy session. So they do send their apologies, but he had to go off to another meeting.
Thank you. And we had another speaker that another legislator we were expecting to hear from. And Mary, you wanted to say something about Delegate Watts?
Yes. I'm disappointed that she wasn't able to join us, but I do understand. And I just wanted to share with people that she's the longest serving woman delegate in our House of Delegates. And she has been such a great supporter of our women's legislative roundtables over the years. And I also want to share that this women's legislative roundtable has been going on for 40 years. And I really appreciate that we've been able to continue it. And finally, I want to thank all of our members for joining us by Zoom. And I want to give a big thank you to Joan Port, our first vice president, for organizing this League Day, and to Julia Tanner, our advocacy chair, who did a wonderful job with the very comprehensive advocacy class. And I hope that you all are able to enjoy all the notes and all the information that was put in the Google Drive. And good luck.
So thank you all again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. And that one will be right before crossover, and we'll have a meeting and decide if we're going to get in one more before the end of session or not. So stay tuned. We have at least one more, and we hope to see you again next week. Thank you all, and happy advocating.